When my daughter Olivia told me she wanted to rewrite my life story, I smiled and nodded, the dutiful father as always. But inside, something stirred. A flicker of defiance, a glimmer of the man I used to be before the years and the losses had worn me down to a shadow. I thought of the memories she wanted to erase, the truths she wanted to bury. And I knew that this time smiling and nodding wouldn't be enough. This time I would have to fight for the only thing I had left. My story, my truth, my legacy. And so, with a heavy heart and a steady hand, I began to write. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The morning sun slanted through the blinds of my study, casting pale fingers of light across the desk where I sat, pen in hand. The blank page stared up at me, as daunting and unfamiliar as a foreign land. It had been years since I'd written anything more than a birthday card or a thank you note. Years since I'd felt the old urgency, the burning need to shape my thoughts into words. But today, the need was there again, as fierce and insistent as it had been when I was a young man with fire in my blood and poetry in my soul. I closed my eyes, let my mind drift back to the conversation that had brought me to this moment. Olivia's voice, always so gentle, so reasonable, echoed in my ears. "Dad, I've been thinking. Your life, your experiences, they're too valuable to be lost. You've lived through so much, seen so many things. I really think we should write your memoirs together. I could help you get your thoughts in order, polish the language a bit. We could self-publish it, leave something behind for the grandkids." I remember the way she looked at me then, her eyes soft, with something that might have been pity. Or maybe it was just love, the helpless kind that makes you want to smooth away every rough edge, erase every blemish. I couldn't blame her for wanting to see me as she'd always seen me, strong, steady, unbreakable. But the truth was, I'd been broken for longer than she knew. "I don't know, Livy," I heard myself say. "I'm not sure I have much to say that anyone would want to read." But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't true. I had plenty to say. About love, about loss, about the wild, winding road that had brought me to this quiet little house with its dying garden and its ghosts. The question was, did I have the courage to say it? Olivia reached out then, laid a hand on my arm. "Just think about it, okay? It could be good for you, Dad. Help you make sense of things." I nodded, smiled, did all the things a good father is supposed to do. But inside I was already far away, lost in memories of the man I used to be, the life I used to live, the man who stayed up all night scribbling verses on the back of napkins, the back of receipts, any scrap of paper he could find, who walked the city streets until dawn, drunk on words and cheap wine, watching the stars fade into another empty morning. That man had been gone a long time, buried under years of factory work and family dinners, hardware store runs and hospital visits. I thought he was gone for good, nothing but a whisper and a shadow. But now, sitting at my old desk, with the page in front of me and the pen in my hand, I could feel him stirring again, struggling up from the deep sleep of complacency. I could feel the old words buzzing in my blood, the old rhythm sparking in my fingers. I opened my eyes, looked down at the page. It wasn't blank anymore. In my neatest handwriting, the kind reserved for poems and prayers, I had written a single word: legacy. And just like that, I knew what I had to do. Knew that this was my last chance to tell my own story, my own way. Not the shiny, happy version Olivia wanted to sell, but the raw, unvarnished truth of a life lived and lost and found again. I picked up the pen, took a deep breath. And then, in a voice rusty from years of silence, I began to write. Chapter 2. The words came slowly at first, halting and uncertain as a newborn foal. But as the minutes turned to hours, and the pages filled with my crabbed, spidery script, I felt a growing sense of rightness, of purpose. This was what I was meant to do, what I'd always been meant to do. Not just record the facts of my life, but shape them into something more, a story, a truth, a legacy. I wrote about my childhood on the south side of Chicago, the cramped apartment with its peeling wallpaper and its ever-present tang of cabbage and cigarette smoke. I wrote about my mother's hands, raw and red from scrubbing other people's floors, and my father's voice, deep and mellow as he sang the old songs of his homeland. I wrote about the day I discovered poetry, the day a tattered copy of Leaves of Grass found its way into my hands and changed my life forever. How the words seemed to sing to me, to call out to some hidden part of myself I'd never known existed. I wrote about the years of scribbling and dreaming, of sending out poems to every magazine and journal I could find, only to receive a never-ending stream of rejections. But I also wrote about the day my first poem was accepted, the day I saw my name in print for the first time, how it felt like a kind of magic, a kind of power. I wrote about meeting Lily, my beautiful, brilliant Lily, at a poetry reading in a smoky basement bar, how she'd smiled at me across the room, and how I'd known in that instant that I would love her for the rest of my life. I wrote about our wedding day, how we'd danced barefoot in the park with daisies in our hair, how we'd promised each other forever, under a sky full of stars. And then finally, I wrote about the day forever ended, the day Lily collapsed in our kitchen, the day the doctor said the word cancer, and the world stopped turning. I wrote about the months of hospitals and treatments, of hope and despair and everything in between. I wrote about the way she'd held my hand at the end, the way she'd whispered, "I love you," with her last breath. I wrote it all down, every joy and sorrow, every trial and humph, every moment that had shaped me into the man I was. And as I wrote, I felt a sense of clarity, of certainty, that I hadn't felt in years. This was my story, my truth, and no one could take it away from me. When I finally set down the pen, my hand was cramped and aching, my eyes blurred with tears. But I felt a sense of peace, of completion, that I hadn't known was possible. I had done what I set out to do. I had told my story, my way. I leaned back in my chair, looked out the window at the fading light. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, a car horn honked. The world went on, oblivious to the small miracle that had just taken place in this quiet little room. But I knew, and that was enough. I gathered up the pages, stacked them neatly on the desk. In the morning, I would take them to the copy shop, have them bound and cover-covered. I would send a copy to Olivia, to the grandkids, to anyone who cared to read them. But first I would read them myself, one last time. I would savor every word, every memory, every moment of this life I had lived and loved and lost. And then I would let it go. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon when I pulled into the parking lot of the copy shop, my manuscript clutched tightly to my chest. I'd been up all night, reading and rereading the pages, marveling at the way the words seemed to come alive on the paper, painting pictures of a life I'd almost forgotten. Now, As I walked through the automatic doors and into the bright, humming space of the shop, I felt a flutter of nerves, of uncertainty. What if no one wanted to read my story? What if Olivia was right and my memories were better left buried? But then I thought of Lily, of the way she'd always believed in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself. I thought of the way she'd loved my poems, the way she'd trace the lines with her finger and smile, that secret smile that was just for me. "You have a gift, Bruce," she'd always said. "Don't hide it away. The world needs your words, your truth." And so, with a deep breath and a silent prayer, I approached the counter and handed over my manuscript to the bored-looking teenage boy behind the register. "I need 20 copies, please," I said, my voice only shaking a little. "Bound and cover-covered, if you can." The boy nodded, barely glancing up from his phone. "Sure thing, man. It'll be ready in a couple of hours." I paid the deposit and walked out of the store, feeling a strange mixture of relief and anticipation. I'd done it. I'd taken the first step in sharing my story with the world. Now all I could do was wait and see what happened next. I spent the next few hours wandering the city streets, lost in thought. I watched the people rushing by, the cars and buses and bicycles all jostling for space on the crowded roads, and I marveled at the way life just kept moving forward. No matter what trial and humps and heartaches came along. When I finally made my way back to the copy shop, the sun was high in the sky, and the store was buzzing with activity. I approached the counter with a sense of trepidation, half expecting the boy to tell me there'd been some kind of mistake, that my manuscript had been lost or damaged or simply wasn't worth printing. But instead he handed me a neatly wrapped package, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Here you go, man. 20 copies, just like you asked." I took the package with trembling hands, felt the weight of it in my arms. And suddenly I knew that this was more than just a stack of paper and ink. This was my legacy, my gift to the world. I walked out of the store blinking back tears, and as I made my way home I felt a sense of peace, of rightness, that I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. That evening I sat down at my kitchen table and carefully unwrapped the package, laying out the copies of my manuscript like precious treasures. I ran my fingers over the glossy covers, the crisp white pages, and I felt a swell of pride, of accomplishment, that I hadn't felt in years. I picked up a copy, opened it to the first page, and there, in bold black letters, were the words I'd poured my heart and soul into. "Legacy" by Bruce Chandler. I smiled, felt a tear slip down my cheek. And then, with a sense of purpose and determination, I picked up a pen and began to write. "Dear Olivia," I began, "I know this isn't the book you wanted me to write, but it's the book I needed to write, the story I needed to tell. And I hope that, in reading it, you'll come to understand a little bit more about the man I am and the life I've lived." The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity and anticipation. I mailed copies of my book to everyone I could think of, family, friends, old colleagues from my poetry days. I even sent one to the library in my hometown, with a note asking them to add it to their collection. And then I settled in to wait. I didn't expect much, to be honest. I knew my story wasn't the kind of thing that would set the literary world on fire. It was just the simple, honest account of one man's life, the joyos and sorrows, the trios and humps, and the moments that had shaped me into the person I was. But as the days turned into weeks, something strange began to happen. I started receiving letters and emails from people I'd never met, strangers who had somehow come across my book and felt compelled to reach out. "Your words spoke to me in a way nothing else has," wrote one woman from Seattle. "I lost my husband to cancer last year, and reading about your journey with Lily gave me a sense of comfort, of connection, that I didn't know I needed. I've always wanted to be a writer, but I never had the courage to pursue it," wrote a young man from New York. "But reading your story, seeing the way you poured your heart and soul into your craft, even in the face of rejections and setbacks, it inspired me to pick up a pen and start writing again." And on they came, these messages of gratitude and encouragement, of shared pain and shared trial and humph. Each one felt like a small miracle, a validation of everything I'd poured into those pages. But still, there was one response I was waiting for, one opinion that mattered more than all the others combined. And as the days turned into weeks, and still I heard nothing from Olivia, I began to feel a sense of unease, of doubt. Maybe she was right, I thought. Maybe my story really was better left untold. And then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, there was a KCK at my door. I opened it to find Olivia standing on my porch, a copy of my book clutched tightly to her chest. Her eyes were red and puffy, her face streaked with tears. For a long moment we just stood there looking at each other, and then without a word, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me, burying her face in my shoulder. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered it, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry, I had no idea." I held her close, felt my own tears threatening to fall. "It's okay, Livy. You couldn't have known." She pulled back, looked up at me with shining eyes. "But I should have. I should have taken the time to really listen to you, to understand what you've been through. Instead, I just assumed I knew what was best, assumed that I could somehow rewrite your story into something neater, something easier." I shook my head, felt a small smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "But that's not how life works, is it? It's messy and complicated and full of twists and turns we never see coming. And the only way to make sense of it is to tell it like it is, warts and all." Olivia nodded, a rueful smile spreading across her face. "You're right. And that's exactly what you did, Dad. You told your story, your truth. And it's beautiful." I felt a warmth spreading through my chest, a sense of peace and rightness that I hadn't felt in years. "Thank you, Livy. That means more to me than you could ever know." We talked for hours that afternoon, about the book and about life, about the memories we shared and the ones we'd never known. And as the rain pattered against the windows and the day faded into evening, I felt a sense of connection, of understanding, that I'd never felt before. It was a new beginning, a chance to start over and build something better, something truer. And I knew that, no matter what the future held, I would face it with my head held high and my story held close to my heart. The success of my little book took me by surprise. What had started as a simple act of self-expression, a way to make sense of my own life and experiences, had somehow struck a chord with people all over the country. Within a few months, I started receiving invitations to speak at writers' conferences and bookstores, to share my story and my insights with audiences eager to learn from my journey. At first, I was hesitant. After all, I was just a retired factory worker with a knack for scribbling, not some literary luminary. But with Olivia's encouragement and support, I decided to step out of my comfort zone and give it a try. And to my amazement, I found that I had a knack for it. Standing up in front of a room full of strangers and baring my soul, sharing the trio and humps and heartaches that had shaped me. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. But more than that, it was meaningful, a way to connect with others on a deep human level, to offer comfort and inspiration, and maybe even a little bit of wisdom. As the months passed and my little book continued to gain traction, I found myself traveling more and more, visiting cities I'd never seen and meeting people from all walks of life. I spoke at high schools and universities, at community centers and retirement homes. And everywhere I went, I was struck by the way my words seemed to resonate with people, to offer them a glimmer of hope or a moment of recognition in their own lives. But even as I reveled in this unexpected second act, this chance to make a difference in the world, I never forgot the reason I'd started writing in the first place. Every time I stood up on that stage, every time I looked out at those expectant faces, I felt Lily there with me, smiling that secret smile and urging me on. "You're doing it, my love." I could almost hear her whisper. "You're living your truth, sharing your light with the world." And so I kept going, kept writing and speaking and connecting with others. Because I knew that, in some small way, I was honoring Lily's memory with every word, every story, every moment of laughter or tears or bravery or breaking silence. And I knew that, no matter where this unexpected journey took me, I would always carry her with me, my muse, my love, my guiding light. As the year drew to a close and the invitations began to slow, I found myself back in my little house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by the familiar comforts of home. But something had changed, shifted in some fundamental way. I was no longer the same man who had started this journey, no longer content to simply fade into the background of my own life. I had found my voice, my purpose, my reason for being. And I knew that, whatever challenges or trials and humps lay ahead, I would face them with my head held high and my heart wide open. Because I was a poet, a storyteller, a dream-meme, and that was a legacy worth living for. One crisp autumn morning, as I sat at my desk, sipping coffee and watching the leaves dance in the wind, I heard a soft k-k-k at the door. Puzzled, I made my way to the front of the house, wondering who could be visiting at such an early hour. When I opened the door, I found myself face to face with a young woman, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, and her eyes shining with a mix of nerves and excitement. She clutched a worn copy of my book to her chest, like a talisman against the world. "Mr. Chandler?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm sorry to bother you so early, but I had to come, to thank you, in person." I blinked, feeling a rush of warmth and gratitude washing over me. "Please come in," I said, stepping aside to let her enter. "And call me Bruce." She followed me into the living room, perching on the edge of the sofa, as if afraid to take up too much space. I settled into my armchair, waiting patiently for her to gather her thoughts. "I read your book," she said finally, her fingers tracing the worn edges of the cover. "And it changed my life in ways I never could have imagined." I leaned forward, my heart quickening in my chest. "How so?" I asked gently. She took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for a great revelation. "I lost my mother to cancer last year," she said, her voice crookieing with emotion. "And ever since then, I've felt like I was drifting, lost in this sea of gyar, this sea of grief and anger and confusion. But then I read your words, your story, and suddenly everything made sense. I felt tears pricking at the corners of my eyes, a lump rising in my throat. "I'm so sorry for your loss," I said softly, "and I'm honored that my book could bring you some comfort, some clarity." She nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "It did more than that," she said. "It inspired me to start writing again, to start putting my own thoughts and feelings into words. And it gave me the courage to pursue my dreams, to take risks, and chase after the things that matter most to me." I sat back in my chair, feeling a rush of pride and humility washing over me. That's incredible," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "I never imagined that my little book could have such an impact, could touch someone's life in such a profound way." She reached out, taking my hand in hers. "But it did," she said, her eyes shining with sincerity. "And I just wanted you to know that, to understand how much your words mean to me, and to so many others out there." We talked for hours that morning, swapping stories and sharing memories, laughing and currying and reveling in the simple joy of human connection. And when she finally left, with a promise to stay in touch and a copy of my book clutched tightly to her chest, I felt a sense of purpose, of meaning, that I hadn't felt in years, because I knew that, in some small way, I had made a difference. I had used my words, my truth, to touch another soul, to offer comfort and inspiration and hope in a world that so often felt devoid of all three. And I knew that, as long as I had breath in my body and a pen in my hand, I would keep writing, keep sharing, keep connecting with others in the only way I knew how. Because that was my legacy, my gift to the world, and I would honor it, cherish it, with every fiber of my being. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, I continued to receive letters and emails from readers all over the country, each one a testament to the power of words, of stories, to change lives and bring people together. And with each passing day, I felt a growing sense of gratitude, of humility, for the incredible journey that had brought me to this moment. Because I knew that in the end it wasn't about fame or fortune or any of the trappings of success. It was about something much simpler, much more profound. It was about love, in all its many forms. The love of a husband for his wife, a father for his daughter, a writer for his craft. The love that had sustained me through the darkest of times, that had given me the strength to keep going even when all seemed lost. And it was about the love of strangers, of kindred spirits connected by the power of the written word. The love that had brought that young woman to my doorstep, that had inspired countless others to reach out and share their own stories, their own triumph and humps and dreams. That was the real legacy, the real magic of it all. And as I sat at my desk, surrounded by the warmth and comfort of my little home, I knew that I would spend the rest of my days nurturing that love, tending to it like the precious gift it was, because in the end, that was all that mattered. And I was graceful, so incredibly graceful, to have been given the chance to be a part of it all. As the months turned into years and my little book continued to make its way into the hearts and minds of readers all over the world, I found myself settling into a new rhythm, a new way of being. I still wrote every day, still poured my heart and soul into the pages of my notebook. But now, my writing had a different purpose, a different sense of urgency. I was no longer writing just for myself, no longer scribbling away in the hopes of making sense of my own life and experiences. Now I was writing for others, for the countless men and women who had reached out to me over the years, sharing their own stories of love and loss, of triumph and humph and hope. I wrote about the joyos of fatherhood, the challenges and the triumph and humphs of raising a child in a world that could be so beautiful and so brutal all at once. I wrote about the ache of losing a spouse, the gaping hole that could never quite be filled, no matter how much time passed or how many memories remained. And I wrote about the power of the human spirit, the incredible resilience and strength that could be found in even the darkest of moments. I wrote about the way a single act of kindness, a single word of encouragement meant, could change the course of a life forever. Through it all, Olivia remained my rock, my constant source of love and support. She had become more than just my daughter. She was my collaborator, my sounding board, my biggest fan. Together we worked to spread the message of my little book far and wide, to share the lessons I had learned with as many people as possible. And as the years passed and my hair turned from gray to white, I began to feel a sense of peace, of contentment, that I had never known before. I had found my calling, my reason for being, and I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them with my head held high and my heart wide open. But even as I reveled in this new sense of purpose, I never forgot the woman who had started it all. Lily, my beautiful, brilliant Lily, remained the guiding light of my life, the source of all that was good and true in the world. I talked to her every day, sharing my triumph and humps and my joyos, my fears and my hopes for the future. And though I knew she was gone, though I knew I would never again feel the warmth of her hand in mine, or see the sparkle in her eyes, I could still feel her presence, could still hear her voice whispering in my ear. "Keep going, my love," she would say. "Keep sharing your truth, your light with the world, because that is the greatest gift you could ever give to yourself and to all those who have the good fortune to cross your path." And so I did. I kept writing, kept speaking, kept connecting with others in the only way I knew how, because I knew that, as long as I had breath in my body and love in my heart, I would never stop trying to make the world a little bit brighter, a little bit better than it was before. That was my legacy, my promise to the woman who had given me everything, and I would honor it, cherish it, with every fiber of my being, until the day I took my final breath. As I sat on my front porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon and the stars begin to twinkle in the darkening sky, I felt a sense of peace, of gratitude, washing over me. I had lived a life full of love and laughter, of triumph and humph and joy. And though I knew my time on this earth was drawing to a close, I was not afraid, because I knew that in the end, I had made a difference. I had used my words, my truth, to touch the lives of others, to offer comfort and hope and inspiration to those who needed it most. And I knew that no matter what lay ahead, no matter what challenges or triumph and humps the future might bring, I had lived a life worth living, a life full of meaning, full of purpose, full of love. And that, in the end, was the greatest gift of all. As I sit here now, in the quiet of my little house, surrounded by the warmth and comfort of a life well lived, I can't help but feel a sense of wonder, of awe, at the incredible journey that has brought me to this moment. I think back to the man I was before, the man who had lost his way, who had forgotten the power and the beauty of his own voice, and I marvel at the transformation that has taken place, at the incredible resilience and strength of the human spirit. Because that, in the end, is what this story is all about. It's about the power of words, of truth, to change lives and bring people together. It's about the incredible tapestry of human experience, the way our stories intersect and interweave, creating something greater than the sum of its parts. And it's about the power of love, in all its many forms. The love of a husband for his wife, a father for his daughter, a writer for his craft. The love that sustains us, that gives us the courage to keep going, even when all seems lost. As I look back on my life, on the trio and humps and the joyos that have shaped me into the man I am today, I feel a sense of gratitude, of humility, that I have been given the chance to be a part of it all. And I know that, no matter what the future holds, I will carry this love, this light, with me always, because that is the greatest legacy I could ever leave behind, and it is one that I will cherish, honor, with every breath I take, until the very end. So to all of you out there, to all the dreamers and the storytellers and the seekers of truth, I say this: never give up on your voice, your vision, your truth, because the world needs your stories, your light, more than you could ever know. And to my beautiful Lily, my love, my guiding star, thank you for everything. I will see you soon. CTA. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.